Welcome everybody, thank you for tuning in for another episode from our 2022 eMTB Shootout. Today we have another bike from the Enduro category up for review, and that is the Cube Stereo Hybrid 160. This bike stands out as being the only 27.5-inch wheeled bike in the competition this year. Next to me, I have Ryan and Cole. They were two of the 8 testers here on the test staff in Knoxville, Tennessee. And before we get into ride impressions and thoughts, we're gonna go over the specs and geometry of this bike. So the Cube Stereo Hybrid 160 retails for $6,149. It is a carbon and aluminum frame. Rear triangle is aluminum. Up front, you've got a carbon main frame. 160 millimeters of rear travel, 170 up front. A RockShox Domain R fork with a RockShox Deluxe Select rear shock. Shimano Dior 12-speed drivetrain. You've got Magura MT30 brakes. Cube's in-house EX30 wheel set, a 150 millimeter dropper post, also a Cube in-house spec, 165 crank arms, and it is all powered by a Bosch CX G4 drive unit, putting out 85 Newton meters of torque with a 625 watt-hour battery. The geometry on the bike, I think we all agree, was a little interesting, a little different.
A little steep.
Yeah.
Steep on the front end, a little short reach.
Yes, yeah. So it had a 65-degree head tube angle, a 75.5 degree seat tube angle. There's a 460 millimeter reach on our size large, a 614 millimeter stack height, 441.5 chainstays, and a 1,230 millimeter wheelbase. And there's a 12.5 millimeter bottom bracket drop. So let's talk a little bit about, I guess, geo when it comes to climbing. Cole, why don't you lead that off?
Yeah, so I would say one of the first things that I noticed with this bike was the kind of longer stem. You were able to get your weight over the front, but it made it seem a little twitchier than other bikes on some of the climbs. But the Geo itself, the cockpit, was comfortable at 6'1" with huge arms. It wasn't too short, but I would say that long stem did make it, both on descending and climbing, just twitchy and kind of unsure of itself sometimes.
Yeah, a little easy to fickle around those tight switchbacks.
Totally,
and maneuver up
yeah.
little kind of awkward techie climbs. That helped. That helped for sure.
Like there's that one section with those S-turns yesterday towards the end of the day that we were repeating, and you liked climbing that.
Yeah, you just buzzed up it, especially with the Bosch. It just, you pointed anything where you wanted to go, and it just buzzed right up it.
The wheelbase was noticeable on the climbs and some of those tight switchbacks, coming from some of the other bikes that are quite a bit longer. It's like, oh wow, I can just like zip up and kind of put some pace onto the guys behind me.
Mm-hmm. And from a comfort perspective, because of the rear suspension, right, it is a very just floaty, just pillowy feel.
Plush bike.
So I think for all-day adventures, people are looking to put big miles in, that real soft suspension platform seems like a plus.
Absolutely. I have my first note on climbing was all-day comfort. Like it was just super soft as far as the chattery rocks, even going through rock gardens and pedaling through rock gardens. Given that it's a 27.5 bike, I didn't have any pedal strikes on this bike as I did on some of the other bikes. I think that's a huge plus when you're thinking, oh, if I'm going into backcountry, I don't know what trails I'm going to be riding. There might be some sort of steps you have to get up. It's advantageous to have a little bit shorter cranks like this bike.
Plush, but you didn't find every hole and fall into the hole, and it didn't slow you down. So
see, now I thought there was a couple sections where, and I don't know if you guys saw it, but like I witnessed Sour Patch like stuffing that front end into some rock gardens, like up in the
descending?
Yes.
Okay, so yes, descending I did feel that.
Probably because you're a little bit farther forward.
Absolutely.
So, and with the just overall plush linear suspension, I mean, you'd easily blow through the travel. Mm-hmm. I mean, even just off like takeoffs and jumps and lips and drops. I mean, you're plowing through the travel.
Yeah.
The front
so
end.
the soft, supple feel has its drawbacks as well for certain riders, I guess, right?
Yeah.
I think the pace we were riding this bike, we were outworking the suspension a little bit. I think a twin tube shock out back would kind of help that lower end of the travel, kind of just the oil flow, and it did feel like it heated up on some of the longer climbs, or longer descents, sorry. But the Domain fork, man, I was quite impressed with how that thing felt. Like, I've been really impressed with some of the space level RockShox spec forks.
Yeah, there's a couple bikes that have some lower spec RockShox stuff, and it has been quite impressive.
Yeah, feels pretty good. And if this thing just had maybe some volume spacers, and this thing's pretty close, maybe just a couple of like minor adjustments, and it'd be pretty close to where I would like to have a bike, especially if it's priced affordable. The brakes felt pretty good, but the stopping power wasn't there, so maybe that's just a pad swap.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it definitely needs a little change in brake pad compound.
Yeah, that was interesting, because it wasn't like there was air in the system or anything. It was just you had to really put a lot of pressure into the brakes to actually get them to bite. But it's the first time using Maguras for me, and I love the levers. Like, I'm really picky with levers, and it feels like a mix between the Shimano and the SRAM levers, and it's a really cool feeling.
Yeah. Overall, like, who would you say maybe is an ideal consumer for this bike, Frenchie?
Everyday rider. You know, it was playful. It was playful. I mean, we were just going through the travel so quickly. It's a fun bike to ride. It's affordable. I just would change a couple of little small components, and I think it'd really move up in the rankings.
Does the fact that it's got 27.5-inch wheels front and rear do much for you?
No.
Okay.
No. You know, I ride a wide variety of trails, so.
It's not a deal breaker. It's not a standout awesome.
It's noticeably better in some of those tight corners, like those switchbacks. You can really get it through without having to really work the bike, which was rad.
Okay. Would you possibly throw on a slightly better fork, or maybe do an update and convert it to mullet?
So, thinking about that option, I see this bike being good for someone's first e-bike, or maybe someone that's a little older, is getting into mountain biking, that's ready to make that step. And this spec build is perfect for that. I mean, we're not pro riders, but we can push these bikes. And at that high end, it does kind of fall off. But I think the focus of this bike is for more of an entry-level rider or mid-level rider that's looking for those all-day epics. So if you were to get this bike and you love the platform, personally, at someone that's 6'1", I would size up, put a shorter stem on it, and maybe go for a better shock. Honestly, the fork, I think it does awesome. Like, I'm very, very impressed with it. And you're getting the Bosch system, which is a lot of us really favor that power delivery and that feel, especially on the climbs.
Really good platform, just all-around bike.
I know you guys really like that bike. I think actually most of the people who hopped on the Cube were I don't know, would I say pleasantly surprised? I mean, I don't know that many of us looked at that bike and were like, oh, this thing's gonna be a fun bike to ride, which I guess could be something to talk about, is like the appearance. It doesn't really look quite as high end, quite as refined, quite as desirable as some of the other bikes in the Shootout, but
I think we took at face value the suspension spec. We look at it as advanced riders and see, oh wow, it doesn't have a bunch of clickers on it, it's not going to ride good. Then you get on it and it's like, wow, this is like really plush and really soft off the top. And for someone that is less of an advanced rider that's doing 5-foot drops at speed, you don't need that. Like, you really don't need that. And I think the market this bike is aimed at, it's a perfect build.
Okay, all right. Well, there it is. That is the Cube Stereo Hybrid, a really solid bike. Again, most of the crew really enjoyed their time on this bike. I think, the dual 27.5-inch wheels could be an issue for some. I definitely think we all agree brake pad upgrade would be nice. Pretty easy and affordable swap to make these brakes just a little bit better. It's a bike that you can grow into, I think, as a rider. I do think the Geo is an issue worth talking about, and could be problematic for some, but overall, a very solid bike and one we enjoyed Please don't forget to subscribe to the channel. We will be reviewing each of these bikes in the shootout individually before we get to our grand finale episode where we rate and score all the bikes and see how they stack up in the field. Thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you out on the trails.